Welcome here from DappCon in Berlin. We have some amazing gentlemen here with us, and we're here today to talk about safe staking that we announced here at DappCon by HOPR. And some people might wonder, what the hell is this about? How does it work? We actually didn't build this entirely from scratch. We leveraged the Lego building blocks that were around in this ecosystem, and I'm very happy to have some very interesting folks here. So why don't we start with a short introduction on what you guys are working in, and then later on we get into the problems and what we're actually doing here. How about you kick it off, Paul?
All right, cool. So my name is Lansky. I'm the CEO at Dappnode. And what we have is free open source software that you can install in any machine, and it allows you to turn this machine into a blockchain hub or into a decentralized infrastructure hub, or basically, just to put it in plain terms, to be able to deploy validators or nodes or HOPR nodes, for example, with a couple of clicks without any technical knowledge. We are, as we said, we're free open source software, but we also sell pre-installed hardware machine that is basically plug and play. You get it at home, and you plug it to your router, you turn it on, and then it gives you a nice UI where you can just set up a HOPR node or an Ethereum validator, Gnosis chain validator, Luxo validator, a Bitcoin node, Monero node, basically any sort of decentralized infrastructure that you might want. And that's what we do at Dappnode.
I'm Jan from Gnosis Guild. I'm an engineer there, and what Gnosis Guild does is basically taking the ideas of modules for a safe and using this to allow a DAO to grow from a safe to a fully decentralized organization. So we basically established this open standard called Zodiac, which builds on top of the safe module interface and comes up with a very composable design to mix and match modules together to implement any kind of governance primitives that you would like to use. Apart from this, we also do a lot of other experiments. So we've been in a nice 2 years experimentation phase. So we've launched all kinds of experiments, but I guess Zodiac is what we're most well known for.
Cool, thank you. So I'm Richard. I'm the technical founder from the Safe team, formerly known as Gnosis Safe. Just have to mention it still, sadly. We are working on an account standard, more specifically on a modular account standard, since we believe that smart contracts accounts are necessary to really provide the flexibility to cover all the use cases that are already existing in Web 2 and bring them to blockchain and go beyond this, right? Where we want to go into the future. And also, most recently, we are looking into, how can we really scale up this modular approach, especially when it comes to security, as security obviously is a strong focus, as just one simple or small misstep could basically diminish all the work that has been done so far. So a big focus on security in this modular framework.
Very cool. So these are the building blocks, which we'll now try to piece together to explain what the hell we were building here. And so at HOPR, we build privacy infrastructure that people can run at home. So you have your node, which is relaying data for others. And while doing so, you earn money, right? You earn money in forms of HOPR tokens, but you also stake, similar to other crypto networks. You stake money in terms of HOPR token in order to signal that you're there to relay data for others. And we have been, sleepless nights trying to think about, there's this huge risk, right? So I have this machine. I actually have one of the Dappnodes at home. We have this HOPR brand. It looks kind of cool. The idea was you have a box that you might...
Kind of cool?
It looks
amazing.
It looks amazing. That's true. That's true. So the idea is you can put it in your living room and it doesn't look like super lame, and your partner comes in saying, oh, no, like that thing that moves to the basement. That was the idea. But still, I'm a bit concerned, right? Because if I have this thing standing in my living room, there might be friends that I bring over, or this so-called evil maid attack. It's actually called like that, where somebody gains access to your physical device, and I might have a lot of money staked there. So that was something we all felt very uneasy about. And that's when we looked into solutions and we came up with the idea, hey, let's actually use Safe, which is literally the safest place to store money on Ethereum, which has like, how many billion do people have staked?
50 plus. Depends a little bit on the, like if you go to US dollars, it depends obviously on
Yeah.
the value of US, but I think you have 50 plus billion at the current market price.
So there's literally nothing that's more battle proven than that when it in the Ethereum ecosystem is actually in production, used by all size, like small people like me and like the hugest funds that use that. So to use that to secure some of the funds that are, you know, on my node. And then we looked at, well, how do we actually make that happen? Because as we know, every line of code that you write is a liability. You want to reduce the number of lines of code that you actually write yourself. And then we found something amazing from Zodiac, right? So that's the individual pieces we talk about. But I want to hear kind of first like thoughts from Paul on like, you know, what are the concerns on running a node from home, which is cool. Like you guys do a lot. They are really making it as easy as is somehow possible to run a node from home. And yet, you know, there might be some things that you're uneasy about. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, kudos to Safe, because I think it's amazing that normal people like you and me can keep $20 in the same technology that some of the biggest DAOs keep millions and millions, right? And we have the exact same security. It doesn't depend anymore on how rich you are and how much protection you can have. Like it's wild. So kudos to Safe. And I wish our physical devices were as secure, right? But as you said, physical devices are not that secure, because like a Dappnode box is basically a UX wrapper to another technology. It's very important to note that Dappnode in itself is meaningless and useless. Dappnode is only a tool to run things like HOPR and to make them accessible to people that otherwise wouldn't be able to run this infrastructure because they don't know how to run Docker, they don't know how to do a Linux install, they don't know how to... So it's basically a UX that brings to people ease of use for other protocols. Now, with this ease of use sometimes comes unconsciousness. And what this means is that if you are very technical, you might be aware of the risks that you are taking, and you might be able to secure your network in a way that is like as safe as possible. But our target users is a target user that we don't want them to be worrying about this. We do all of that for them. And that's a lot of responsibility that we bear on our shoulders. That's a lot of responsibility of securing the device, securing the machine. And yes, you're right. Like there are private keys stored in this device. There are private keys that can do real things. Like there are Ethereum validators, Gnosis chain validators, Luxor validators, HOPR nodes, Swarm nodes, like whatever you want. There are private keys there that can be used to move funds around. And honestly, like whatever needs to be done in order to take this load out of us and take this load out of the user, like that's honestly, that can only be an improvement.
Yeah. So maybe worth highlighting that from our implementation, the idea is that this can be used as broadly as possible. So if anyone is working on a token infrastructure project, you can copy that code, you can modify that code and use it to your own purposes. In fact, we did this ourselves, right? We came up with this idea and when we thought, well, how do we build this? But luckily there was Zodiac and that did a bunch of that. Can you tell us like, how did you come up with this idea for Zodiac? And what do people use Zodiac for apart from like safe staking the HOPR that we're talking about here?
Right. So I think the idea for Zodiac was born out of this realization that most organizations, they change over time and they need to adjust their tools. And many organizations, when they're small, they're just a small team with a multi-sig. And once they grow and evolve over time, they want to have different governance mechanisms like token voting or, I don't know, you can be very creative when it comes to governance. So instead of then having to fully migrate to a completely new, different DAO platform, the idea was that we basically keep the funds safe and secure in the most trusted solution, which is Safe, and then have just modules that you can enable to fulfill your needs.
What is a module? Maybe you can, because for some people it's not so obvious. What is a module for Safe?
Right. So Safe, usually you know it as a multi-sig, right? So you have a bunch of owners and then a certain threshold for the signature. For example, like 3 out of 5 of the owners need to sign to make the Safe execute any transaction. And with a module, you can basically go around this whole multi-sig flow and have different ways to control the Safe. So a module is a very powerful thing. Actually, once you enable it on a Safe, you give that module unilateral control. So also the modules need to be very well built, well audited, because this is where you put all your trust. And this is also where our idea came from, to have these small composable modules that can be well audited, well maintained, instead of everybody writing their custom code that is probably more prone to errors. So we came up with different kinds of modules. One example being the roles mod. The roles mod is a module where you can have, again, modules, basically implementing the same interface as the Safe itself, but then you can...
And for context, that's what we base our work on at HOPR, to build this permission scheme into the SafeStaking interface. Yeah.
Right. So the roles mod is like a general purpose mod you can enable on your Safe, and then the modules that you enable on the roles mod, they can get fine-grained permissions on what they're allowed to call. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, what you guys needed for HOPR. And
Sebastian, would you mind going over what the SafeStake structure is? How does it look like?
Yeah. So basically, initially there was your HOPR node that had access to money and was running software. And now what we did is we separated that. So we have your HOPR node that still runs software, because that's the thing it does. Then separate from that, we have the Safe, which stores most of your funds and gives permissions. And that is managed. The 2 components are combined by this node module that we built there, which is based off of Zodiac, which allows your Safe to say, okay, you can manage one HOPR node, but you might be an absolute, HOPR degen that runs like 12 nodes in different locations that you want to manage. And that's what you can use that for. And you can say, okay, how much money each Safe has access to, and what exact functions on what smart contracts it can manage. And this, in my view, is kind of the better version of what Ethereum has. Ethereum stakers have, if you run a validator, you have a so-called withdrawal key, which is just a single key, right? So we are trying to generalize that by saying, no, actually, it's kind of stupid that you just have one externally owned account, like one private key controlled account that can withdraw. So it should be a multi-sig there. And in fact, actually, what was funny was, I think a couple of weeks ago, there was Vitalik going out saying, I don't stake more of my ETH because it's kind of complicated to set up a multi-sig. Well, our approach was, well, let's make that easier. Not just for Vitalik staking his ETH, but for everyone staking their tokens in infrastructure projects.
Do you see, sorry, I kind of took the questioning role here. Do you see a lot of projects deploying their own safes per project? So if we wanted to do some staking, we would just copy what you have done, and you would have this separation of concerns, and Dappnode would have a safe that maybe it is a part of the HOPR safe. How does this look like?
So today, the state of affairs of token-based staking infrastructure is pretty sad. It's run some software, copy some key files around, and hope that nobody finds and intercepts your key files. That's the sad state of affairs, which we try to contribute to improving. And what I could see is that you would have, going forward, many people using a similar architecture where you have your Dappnode, this beautiful box that you buy from Dappnode. And with that, you have your potentially one single safe instance, which has a HOPR managed node management module. And maybe you have some others, just to throw in some names, maybe, you have the graph nodes, indexers, which index events from Ethereum, which again, you run on your Dappnode and then you manage to your safe in a safe way. Sorry, there's so many puns with safe here. And you can manage all of them from one safe instance. So that's how I would imagine this to go. But yeah, maybe Richard can say a few words on how that connects to there's some changes on the Safe side of Safe moving towards a protocol. Like, how do you see that playing together with other protocols? It's a bit confusing, right? For people, Safe was so far a product, now you guys announced you're going to move it to infrastructure. How do these things play together?
I mean, it was always two parts, right? Like you always had the interface, which is more the product for the end user, and you always had the smart contracts, which were basically like a general infrastructure piece, which we, from the early times on, always considered a public good. And it was all about this moving away. And I mean, similar how HOPR has the vision to improve the staking infrastructure, for us it was moving away in general from this all or nothing approach that is dominant with private key pairs, right? Like you have threshold signatures in other parts, but in general, if somebody gets access to your key, they have full access and potentially can do everything that you can do. It's very hard to give partial access. And so that's also where then what Jan talked about with Zodiac, where we introduce a lot of flexibility. But obviously what you also see is that if you have a lot of flexibility, as Jan said, it also brings quite some risk with you, right? Like we all know Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben with great power comes great responsibility from Spider-Man, just in case you didn't know it. So the question is, but how do we handle this, right? Like, and we saw that, like looking back at 2017 was the first Safe version with modules, and until now there's not really this big ecosystem where people write modules and say, let's go, right? Like, and why is this? It's because you have to put the same responsibility into a module as in your core contract, and which is still, even though you try to minimize it per use case, it's still a lot of things that you have to consider. And there we see having a protocol, right? Like having, when you have a protocol which then guarantees interoperability and also security, and then enhances additionally to all of this also discoverability, then you can get a protocol that can actually thrive forward, and where you can then have more modules spinning up. You can say, okay, there are certain rules how you can enable them and what standards they have to follow. Increasing the compatibility, right? And that is what we want to have. We theoretically just using the HOPR staking or the safe staking, how it's called, right? Like as one part of your overall setup. Maybe you want to still have that other mechanisms related to additional roles so that other protocols can be accepted, or you even want that this HOPR staking, the safe staking then is controlled by a DAO, right? Like, and want to connect it to a safe snap, so snapshot space. So, but to get this done in a way that not every setup then has to be individually audited again and constantly monitored for security bugs, we say we have to create a protocol to really provide the layers that everybody can build on top of without sacrificing the security or having to spend enormous resources in verifying the security.
Yeah. So now one thing towards Safe that I'm thinking about when I think about this is like, now there's other projects that write modules for you, right? So Zodiac is focusing on that. Like we built something, and others like, how do you feel about that? Because theoretically these modules come with great responsibility. They could break stuff, right? So isn't that a risk?
I mean, no risk, no fun, right? So in general, we feel quite good about it, right? Like we, from the beginning, we said there is so much potential in the smart account ecosystem, we cannot handle it all ourselves, right? Like, so if we try to do everything, potentially we are spreading so thin that we cannot take advantage of the full potential. And this is really, for us, okay, the start is that we get others to write it, right? Like, yes, in the beginning there will be risk, but we need to get the insights. Okay, what are these risk factors? Where do we need to create circuit breakers that allow us then to increase or like minimize the risk, increase the security, right? And this is where we are right now. Right now we're at the stage where we say, okay, we have a better understanding what risks exist. We know where should we minimize complexity, how do we write modules, where do we need more information from the modules to provide better like information networks that then the users can consume. And now that's, again, the point where we then now create a protocol around this to increase the security again, right? Like it's a little bit then when you have this design thinking approach, right? Like you first go wide and then you go, like you focus again, right? Like first you need to understand your whole context and your whole like play field before you can then focus again.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Then you want to respond something to that, or? Okay. Then I have a question to all of you on a totally different topic. It's a bear market. It's rough. People are kind of, questioning, what are we doing here? And my question to all of you, you can choose who wants to go first, is like, what is the purpose? What are we actually doing here? Like, what do you tell people who are questioning themselves in these days? Is it all going to zero? What are we actually doing here?
What are we doing here? It's an interesting question. For me, I have always seen this as this phenomenal chance to do really research. How can we take how can we decentralize certain trust assumptions, right? Like currently, a lot of users, without thinking about it, put trust in a lot of centralized corporations, and they have very different incentives, these corporations, than a lot of their users, right? And we have seen in Web 2 in the normal world, like they have a lot of initiatives where you would say, okay, we want to minimize logged in, people should be able to port their data to all the different parts. And I think actually, this is for me very important, like a very big benefit of Ethereum and a lot of the blockchain ecosystem space, where since everything, at least currently, and I hope it stays like this, is open source, and we try to generate standards, users are more in control of their own assets, and they can choose really where to go. And this is to a big part lacking still in the Web 2 world. And yes, I would always say this bear markets in general for me are a chance, also because you generally see who is just in there for the speculation part. And again, these people who are in there just for the speculations normally align actually more towards this traditional centralized instances from Web 2. So getting them a little bit out, focusing again on the research is also a chance, right? Like it's not that black and white how I made it sound right now, but you always have to see it as a chance where we say, okay, now it's time to focus. It's less speculative because you have it's more the enthusiasts, the people that really are motivated about the space.
Yeah, and what do we do here? What's the point?
Yeah, basically second this. It's about self-custody, the core values that we need to come back to right now in the bear market. Also, like still dreaming of this dream of building like a decentralized financial world. I think we need to go a long way, and as you said, like now is the time where you need to come back to these values, and I think where we have to work on most to get there is also like on the user interface layer to make the decentralized technology as easily accessible as the Web 2 world to everybody. So I hope that we can make good progress to that with less distractions during a bear market like this. Yeah.
Good. Double down on values.
Yeah, absolutely. I love bear markets. It's cleanup time. It's there's a lot of mistakes that there's a lot of people going into Web3 trying to replicate models that come from the old times. And you said one thing. You said like, okay, no, actually, I think it was you who talked about trust assumptions. And when we talk about trust assumptions, we're talking politics, and not traditional politics, but everything is politics. And for me, blockchain and what we're doing here is we're creating alternatives. And it's impossible that it goes to zero because we're in the industry of creating alternatives. We're in the industry, we're on the experimentation of creating things to substitute what is there right now. And it doesn't mean that we want to eliminate and burn the old world. Maybe sometimes, but it doesn't have to mean that. What it means is that we're creating a counterbalance to the dominant narrative. And this counterbalance is in itself, just the mere existence of it, it already acts as a backstop for the all-encompassing destruction of capitalism without taking account the externalities and without taking account the environment and the human relationships. Just that there exists this potential counterbalance to just simply shareholder value, generating shareholder value. It's already powerful. It's already bringing the right people into finding alternatives. It's already showing other ways of working. And we're in the industry of experimenting with that. And a lot of the experiments will fail. but it doesn't matter. Something will come out of it. And like we know that capitalism tends to absorb everything. So if it absorbs in its functioning, if it absorbs a little bit of the positive that we're creating, a little bit of the world that we're going to change, this is how we're changing the world. We're not changing the world with our protocol that tokenizes real estate. But no, what we're doing is we're eliminating speculation. I wish, right?
We'll get there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. We're eliminating all of these centralized points of power, and we're trying to create alternatives that work better for all of us.
Awesome. I find this a really great summary on focusing on values, focusing on creating something for, providing alternatives. I like that. As I sometimes like to say, it's about empowering the individual. Like we heard, you have the possibility to access, secure your funds with the infrastructure that's used by some of the, richest people in this ecosystem and companies and stuff, which is amazing, right? You have the tools to extend these capabilities in crazy ways, which is, easily possible. And you have the opportunity to run that stuff out of your own home. How much more power could you use? So I thank you all for working what you're working on. Please keep doing that. We need all of you to keep building, to keep delivering the Web3 dream that we all have. Thanks so much, and bye everyone. Greetings from Berlin.
Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you. Bye.